Today I sat down with Alex Hayes, who is the president and co-owner of Boost Pricing, a unique look at how the best in the business approach sales training for real sales teams and real sales leaders. If you are trying to build a sales org, there's a lot of great insights. I mean, one thing I personally took away is that their model is backed by a 100% guarantee. If you don't see growth and success on margin, you get your money back. So really impressive to see 20 years of experience in sales wrapped into this incredible offering. We talk about everything that is connected from ICP to how to approach sales, how to manage sales teams and beyond. So if you're trying to build a sales org, then this one is absolutely for you. Buckle up, relax and enjoy as Alex takes us through a really high value journey. Welcome back to another episode of Successful Scales. Today we are so fortunate, or at least I feel very fortunate, to have my good friend Alex Hayes finally accepting the invite and coming on the podcast. We've tried to schedule this many times. It's finally here, and while I'm excited, all of you listening in should be far more exciting. As usual, I'm not going to spend the time trying to mess about here and introduce you, Alex. I'd love it if you could take it away and tell the audience a little bit about you and the business you're in and what you're up to.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. So Alex Hayes, I'm the president at Boost Pricing. We're a sales training organization. We train teams to win deals at higher margins. My background and how I got here is I've worked in sales my entire life. My parents had small businesses and I would work in sales. So starting at like 8 years old, I was hawking fireworks in the US, the 4th of July. So it ended up being a passion of mine. And I came across this business, which I did not, I'm not the founder of, my business partner's the founder of. I came across it as a sales executive. And I'd been working in sales for probably, at that point, probably 20 years. And had, for the most part, kind of bootstrapped it, as I think most leadership teams do. But like most sales leaders, had just been really good at sales and then got promoted into sales leadership for better or worse. Sometimes that's a really successful model, but I would say usually it's not. And found that I loved supporting salespeople. I liked them being successful. And I heard my business partner now speak, Casey Brown, and her message essentially was that sales teams aren't getting the value that they should, right? They're not capturing the pricing that they should. They're discounting too often. And what I found really interesting and what resonated with me really deeply because of the team that I had at the time was that a lot of it is psychological. You know, it's not about the tactics that we have as a team. It's more about how we view ourselves and the value that we create in the process. It's how we view the product or service that we're selling for sure, and it against the competition. But that idea that like our own psychology is getting in our way from capturing our value and the impact that has on the business that we're working for or with was so different than anything I'd heard before. So at the time I hired Boost Pricing, that was pre-COVID. So I guess that's a decade ago now, when I brought this into my team, and the impact that it had, not just on our numbers, because our margin went up, right? The team got better at negotiating, but the team was really excited and passionate and felt, I think, more pride in their work than they had previously. And as a team leader, that was amazing. And so the journey from there has been coming into the business. We run on EOS, so I came in the business as an integrator. Casey was kind enough to let me know that the posting went up for an integrator position, and she had seen me integrate the training into the business, and she and I had stayed friends. So I got to interview against plenty of other people and got the role as an integrator with Casey. Subsequently left the business for a little while, and now I came back just over a year ago as a partner in the business. And that's the journey quickly.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. 20 years to fit into a couple of minutes is a lot, but I definitely had my head down and wrote quite a few notes on the back of it. So to try and articulate exactly what I'm hearing from you, essentially, the value proposition of Boost is coming in and helping sales teams inside of an org grow that margin by taking more control into the value proposition of what they are selling. And it sounds to me like them taking on that ownership and accountability, and I'm sure it translates to higher incentives that they get, starts to sort of shift the cultural dynamic around it.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's the case, just from a starting point, like you're in many businesses, you're literally, training, coaching, enterprise sales folks and probably all different levels. And, these are all 8 and 9 figure businesses. Maybe you're touching on 7-figure businesses as well. But, these are theoretically people at the top of their game. What are some of the common things that you'll see, surface up on a regular or a semi-regular basis? Like if someone's listening in, they're saying, well, how do I guide my sales team? Or what are the things that are typically coming up? Like what would be your knee-jerk reaction to something like that?
I think that the biggest probably for leadership to see in their sales teams, well, there's a couple, but one of them that I like to laugh about with sales leaders and business owners is your team is making decisions based in fear. So the idea is I'm tackling conversations with CEOs and owners, mostly asking questions, right? Which is good discovery anyway. But there's a few things that I think really resonate when I'm asking questions with most people. And one of those things is, do people on your team make decisions based in fear? Are they afraid that they're going to lose business? And you hear it in conversations all the time, right? Like, well, it's a competitive bid. And so we need to cut margin, or we need to add in extra services or products or whatever. I need this to win. That's fear-based conversation. And if your process is fear-based, you're definitely losing margin. And the other thing that I see often, especially actually in really tenured enterprise sales, and this happens at the CEO level too. So if you have like a founder seller, oftentimes we think that going in and discounting and or giving extras, going above and beyond for no dollar amount, those things are going to make a stronger relationship. Like we're so relationship driven in sales, like great salespeople. That's why we get into it. That's why we enjoy sales, is you get to build a relationship and learn more about people. But we think that discounting is going to make a stronger relationship. So you'll see salespeople that are better and more equipped to negotiate internally for a discount for their customer. And they're more comfortable with that. They're happy to do that daily, negotiate for discounts on behalf of their customer, but they're uncomfortable, unwilling to negotiate with the client on behalf of the organization that they work for, that they're getting paid by.
Well, that's a really interesting point. So my background was client services for the first 10 years of my career. And I really always looked at the lens as an operator and a salesperson effectively in that business as my accountability is to the client. Like if I'm going to retain this business and I'm going to grow it, if I'm effectively the conduit of their business. And so how I've typically pushed my sales team is trying to have that same mindset where I've said to them, ladies, you are fighting for them and I want to actually come and push back on you if you're coming. And it sounds like maybe I'm approaching this the wrong way, but when you look at sort of the relationship in terms of, obviously we're selling talent, we're selling remote talent and people, but am I looking like if someone's listening in and they're hearing like, but they are trying to grow the account, so they should be fighting for their clients and their best interests. Like, where does the buck sort of start and stop? And if, I'm seeing you kind of smiling, smirking here, so I'm curious to learn, like, how wrong am I if I'm wrong, or like how should people actually sort of approach this? Because I'm sure, I think on 2 points, and then I'd like you to answer. But one is like, when it's a founder-led sales journey and that relationship build, I think there's, I feel like you were skirting around it, but there's probably this validation aspect of like, can I be charging this much? You sort of get to a point where like it feels uncomfortable. And so are you discounting because it's a discomfort thing as a founder-led sales? And two, when you get to that level of extension as a sales team, should they be operating, obviously they want the most incentives, they want to make the most money, and so you can control a degree of it, but how much should they be working on the relationship side versus, giving a discount or not?
Yeah. So there's some things to unpack. We'll start with the second question around advocating for your client. I think that it's a fine line to say, I want to advocate for my client. I want the best for them. You can do that and still charge what you're worth and the value that for the value you provide, right? And I think that that's really the difference. Is advocating for your client is great, but you don't have to do it through discounts. You don't have to do it through cheap pricing if you're excellent at what you do, right? And so there are plenty of businesses out there that are the cheapest solution, and that's their entire value proposition, and that's fine, but that's not the businesses that I'm working with, and it's not most service businesses, right? Like, that's not the business that you're in. And sometimes you're saving customers money, but it should be like in the long term through efficiencies or through better talent or better products, right? Advocating for your client to make sure that they get excellent service and that you're living up to the expectation that they had makes complete sense to me. But doing it on the front end when you're trying to win the business in the first place, especially from a place of oftentimes not actually understanding the implications of the decisions that you're pushing for, is a really, really dangerous spot to put your sales teams in. And that's what I try to communicate regularly, is if your team doesn't understand the math, which oftentimes business owners forget the math. And so, it's not a stretch to say your team doesn't understand it, but like, what does the 5% discount do to your business? If you're running at 20% bottom line, you're gutting a huge portion of your profit. If you're running at a 5% bottom line, which a lot of product-based businesses are, and you're allowing people 10 to 15% discounts, like you're selling and losing money. And you can't make up enough revenue on the top line if you're actively losing money on a client. And so I think that from my perspective, it's like, yeah, you want your team to be champions, especially if they're business development and account management, which most businesses, that's how they run their sales teams. But it has to be you have to give them other means to advocate beyond pricing. And there should be plenty to go off of, especially in a business where you're providing long-term relationships and services. Like, there's so much more to rely on than gutting your business profit.
Totally. I mean, it makes total sense. Like, my key takeaways, not just for me, for business leaders, owners, sales team managers, is effectively, one, when you enter the arena, especially for a new client acquisition, and especially if unprompted, which I would imagine happens often because the salesperson's just trying to get a deal done instead of thinking about implications. If our margin is 20%, but we have given them the opportunity to discount to 15%, and that becomes your baseline, when you go, to 5, 10, 15 headcount, you've lost out on so much more because you're grounding it in this lower value tier, and it's very hard to increase price. It's fine to discount with economies of scale. I think that's one sort of key takeaway here. Yeah. And the other, outside of just the dollar value and the net implications, connected to margin, is there's so many other ways that you can create additive value, and it is connected to that degree of proactivity and sort of, for lack of a better term, like being a trusted advisor and guiding that process in a way that makes them feel held and heard and supported. And it's the combination of those two.
The other thing I'll say is that, like, we forget the psychology of the buyer, even though we buy all the time, right? Like, it doesn't hurt to ask for a discount. You might be completely decided, like, I'm absolutely going to work with Multiply Me. They're my people. I trust them. Their proposals better in every single way. I'm willing to pay a little bit more. And also, I've got this other quote that's less. So it doesn't hurt to ask. And we do that. We all do it. And when I do ask, and you're willing to immediately, without asking questions, without probing more, without making sure that we're providing everything that that person needs beyond pricing, we just give them the discount, you're also eroding trust. And people forget that. Like, again, this goes back to the relationship, especially if I see this a lot with founders or small business owners. It's like, we want to build trust in this relationship, so we give them whatever they ask for. When in reality, if we say the price is, let's say, $25,000, and they come back and say, well, I want it for 20, and we say, sure, it's 20 then. You're saying that what I charged you, what I said I was going to charge you in the first place, it's not actually what this product is worth.
Yep.
Or this is worth, right? And so you've immediately eroded trust. You haven't even signed a contract yet. I'm not saying that there's no place for discounts, because there are, but you have to do it from a place of, like, data. And the only way you can gather data in the prospecting, part of your sales cycle is by asking really good questions. And so that's where a lot of it is like, you can build confidence around that to say, well, let's take a pause for a second. Why are you asking? Are you asking because you don't think it's worth it? Are you asking because, just because you have a competitive bid and you don't want to work with those people? Tell me why. Tell me why mine is better, and is it worth the premium? There's so many ways you can go about that and build that relationship in a way that makes you an advisor and has them trust you more and create a longer term relationship, again, without saying, like, jumping to that number that they brought to the table.
Absolutely. It's definitely something that comes up for us. And, with our account management team or our sales team, it's always, they will bring and raise it. And the important thing about not eroding trust is, like, our price is our price. You've come into bat for your client. And so it's really important that if you're going to give any form of discount, it's because you've gone one layer up, two layers up, you fought for it, and you've then actually been additive in the relationship that you're building, if it's going to result in some form of a discount. And I think, to your point, like, there are times where a discount makes sense, but it's all about how it came about and how, the relationship is central to it. I think probably what would be helpful is just understanding a little bit more in terms of, Boost. Yeah, this is a business that's been around for quite a while and has helped many, many companies to increase their margin, sell more, top line, bottom line, all the things that we all want to see happening inside of our business. And, I think people would definitely be curious to understand, like, what does a typical process look like? And what I mean by that is, like, what are the types of questions that leaders should be asking of their sales teams? Or, what are the things that you're typically looking for? And what are the levers that we all have in our wheelhouse to potentially pull?
Yeah, that's a great question. So starting with, ultimately, I would say it's very rare that I come across a business owner who doesn't have a goal for margin that is more than what they're at right now. And literally no framework to get there, no plan in place other than, like, wishful thinking, right? And it's interesting because we build all of this around all of this process and these plans and, rocks and initiatives to increase revenue. And we have them to cut expenses and become more efficient. We have all of these for everything except margin. And so the first thing is, like, give it a seat at the table. just talk about it. Have a conversation with your sales team about what they plan to do to increase margin, and then put it somewhere. You know, if you've got a scorecard or KPIs, like measure your team on margin, even if they're not compensated on it, which is a whole different podcast episode on compensating your team. If you're compensating your team on just top line revenue, like they're going to discount, even though that's not always in their best interest as well, but the impact to them is so much smaller. But ultimately, like, have a conversation with the team of what can you do to increase your margin, and then measure it consistently so that they can see the results. Ideally, they can also understand, again, like, what does a discount do to their pocketbook? Because with all change management, like, what's in it for me is the basis of how you're going to make change in the business. So show them what's in it for them to increase their margin. Schedule a meeting quarterly to say, are we meeting our goals? What can we do this month? And you can have such simple conversations that result in such impactful change to your business. One of the things that we do with teams early in the process, first we teach them what margin does. Like I said, like, we show them like the world's simplest P&L of what is discounting 5% do to a, you know, to a business. So they get it conceptually, but then we jump in and we say, where in this business as a team, we sat down and whiteboard, and no bad idea, so we're just going to throw everything up. Where can we charge more? Where have you seen us provide more value than our clients or than our competitors? Where have you seen us consistently undercharge? Where is half of our team charging, 30 points and half the team charging 15? Those things come up if you just sit in a room for an hour. And the dollars that come out of that meeting are going to blow most people's mind. We did this with one team that, and it was revealed early on that they often don't charge credit card fees. And that was $150,000 in bottom line profit a year, which is huge. Like, you cannot create that on a top line revenue for most businesses with one simple lever, right? So I would say, like, if nothing else, just like have a seat at the table for pricing and talk about it and talk about margin.
Yeah, great insights. And I'm feeling a little bit happy hearing some of these suggestions. And, credit card fees for us are enormous. We're transacting close to $1 million a month. And so you can just imagine what that looks like. But we've built it into our policies, because as a business, you can't eat that kind of fee. It's just, it's insane.
And again, it's like, people are making these decisions without understanding. Like, I can't imagine that the people who might have the power to say, yeah, we'll waive that fee, actually understand that you make $1 million on that, or save, however you want to think about it. But
but I mean, like, if it's a fee of 3% and you're doing $1 million a month, well, that's serious money every month, and annually that's $350,000.
Yeah. And again, things that come out of this, if you're a service-based business, maybe some people are charging X dollar an hour and some people are charging less, right? But, we work with companies that are selling nuts and bolts and screws. Like, if one person is selling a screw for 2 cents and another person is selling it for 1, but you're selling millions and millions and millions of these products, like, tell everyone they can't sell it for less than 2. Right?
Yep.
Like, there are rules that you can create in the business that very quickly change the entire dynamic. And what we were talking about, change the culture of how we sell, right? If you have a tenured team, which, going back to like my journey, I was working in commercial furniture, and every single person on that team had a tenure at that business in that industry longer than I had in a career. Right. So these are like 25, 30 year tenured people in this business. And in their mind, 15% margin was good. Like, that's what good is. Right. And 40% is robbery. Like, we would never do that to somebody. And to say that across the board, no matter what products and services or innovation or creativity the business is bringing, is wild. And you allow that. Right. And so if you're not talking about it, you're not shifting the culture.
Absolutely. You going down this path and having a little bit more clarity in how you're operating. I'm curious to understand in terms of the experience, on the back of all the companies, and all the cultures and the work that you do, how much of it might be hard to quantify exactly, but how much of it is sort of directionally related to comprehension? So the sales team actually understanding what margin does and how making these discounts work is having the net positive impact, versus just now something that wasn't being measured and you've now built clearly some form of like repetition and reviewing of the results and the performance and all that. Like, is one more important than the other? If I'm leading a sales team, is it more important that they understand more of the commercials, or is it just getting those reps on the board and sort of assessing like, oh, I'm selling for this, and going through that motion? Like, I imagine both of them need to be true, but like,
Yeah.
If you had to sort of quantify, or if you only did one thing, let's say the example I would give you is, let's say you operated in the opposite fashion that we do internally, and you were really close. Every agency that I ever worked for, I never knew the numbers. No one was telling me like, I knew when I'd win a pitch, like that's a multi-million-dollar account, or, I'd understand those things, but I didn't understand the margin on different products or services that we were selling. I didn't have that visibility. But, is it just about going through the motion and what gets measured gets managed, or is it the knowledge plus?
I think this isn't probably the answer that anybody wants, is that it depends, right? I think it depends a lot on your team, which is one of the reasons why we cover both of these things. And then once you've covered both of those things, you have to enable the team with tools and resources to actually get more margin, which is actually, I would say, the more important of the three, one of which we didn't talk about as much. But like, if your team is already very competitive and they're getting compensated on profit, I think that oftentimes it's the first one. It's helping them understand the math, because they're going to drive their own behavior, right? I see more and more, especially in like technical sales, that people don't care as much about that. Like, they have a stable base salary, and then there's surely a top line, you can get X, Y, or Z, but that's not what they're budgeting their lifestyle on. And I love that. Like, technical salespeople are some of my favorite people to work for, because they are really passionate about the product or service or business. And so measuring it is more important, right? Like, those are the type of people who are like, if I see it and I have some tools to get the results that my company needs or wants, I'll do it. In which case, like, measure it and show them what they have to do, right? It's interesting, the companies that don't have, like, to your point, that don't have the visibility, that's where, and again, we go through this process with every client of like, you have to teach them, you have to measure them, but you also have to give them the resources to actually get the margin, right? Because if I just say, for most teams, if I just say, I actually want you 3 points higher, they're going to say, well, we can't do that, right? I've been doing this for 1 year, 5 years, 30 years. Like, that's not possible. And so then you have to spend, that's the majority of what I would say our like core program is, if we're coming in and training a team, is helping them with the resources to negotiate better, to ask better questions, help them understand that like their buying behavior, how they buy impacts the way that they sell, how they learned about money and as a family. So if like you have a family that's really uncomfortable talking about money, and then all of a sudden you got into a sales role, like that impacts the way that you discuss money with clients, and your comfort with that. There's so much psychology, but also like sales tactics that go into actually enabling the team, right? And that's the back end of it. And those are things that like founders don't even have, right? Like, founders can sell really well because they're excited about it. They're also oftentimes chief discount officers because they're the ones that want to build a relationship. And so everybody needs the tools to say, people will ask you for discounts. And if you give people that and you don't tell them any of the other stuff, you don't teach them about the math, you don't compensate them, you don't really even hold them accountable, you just get them what they need to like really communicate in a way that clients care about the value that you're providing, especially compared to your competition, like you're going to see your margins increase too. It's just, I don't bring that up when you say, okay, someone on a podcast, like listening to this, what do they do? Because that's unpacking a lot more. That's like, well, what is your team doing right now that we can shift on? What do they need specifically to be better at this? Which is a little bit more dynamic depending on the industry and the client and all of that, the sales process.
Yeah, super interesting on that sort of fork in the road of like your personal relationship with money and how comfortable you are with it. When you look at Boost as a methodology and how you're sort of training sales teams, how much of that is baked into your service delivery and what are sort of the implications?
Yeah, I would say that is the majority of what differentiates with this program compared to other like sales training, sales enablement. And the part that I get really excited about, and I think the part that like when I speak to sales teams who have done a ton of training and are like dragging their feet and not excited to do another one, and then they start this and they're like, oh, this is different. I'm gonna actually learn something from this. It's the mindset aspect of what we train on that is the most powerful. And again, it's like you have to start with the groundwork to get there. We have to build trust with our client, which is sales teams, to start unpacking some of that. But it's where a lot of the big impact comes from. One of the things is that I see regularly is this idea, and we don't frame it this way when we introduce it to people because we've gotten enough pushback that we changed it, but this idea that buyers are liars. I see this especially in the US-based teams hate this concept. They get very uncomfortable with it. You know, we teach this to a team in like Eastern Asia, and they're like, yeah, of course they are. Like they get it, but in the US, it's like you want to believe that the person across from you is telling the truth no matter what, even though their entire job it might be procurement, which means their entire job is to get it cheaper, right?
For the lowest price, yep.
And so we have to, again, it's like one of these things of like, I have to change someone's like core synapses here to say, it doesn't make someone a bad person if they're sitting across the table from you and lying and saying that they cannot buy it for you unless they get it for cheaper. They are probably lying. They can buy it from you, but they can't until they ask. Again, it's like that whole concept. And so
that's their role in the business. That's their accountability. So they may be lying that they don't have approval or budget or whatever, but yeah, they're doing what's in their contract and what's in their best interest. So you have to fight that natural inclination of what the role dictates.
100%. And we forget that because again, we're relationship driven humans. And we know the name of this person's dog and how old their kids are. And right. Like we build genuine, authentic relationships with these people. So they couldn't possibly be lying to us. But they could be omitting some information, right? Like they might not be giving you all the details of their competitive bid. They're not going to say this person, the quote is exactly the same. It's $10,000 less, but they're not going to get it to me on time. They're not, right? Like they have a process that they have to follow. And revealing that in our training, I mean, it's just like, well, have you ever asked for a discount when you had already made a decision? It's like, yeah, of course. Like, okay, so are you a bad person? Are you a liar? No. It's what we do, right? And I think that it's that process of like, how do you buy? How do you build relationships? What is it like for you on the other side? Realizing that the person that you're negotiating with, whether that's a impersonal procurement relationship or you're speaking to someone, founder to founder, like that's a human, and they have their best interest in mind, and their best interest is spending as little money as possible. And it's in your best interest to get as much money as you can for the value that you're providing, right? I'm not telling you be greedy. There's no room for greed in business and relationships either, but there's somewhere in the middle there that makes sense and is logical. And if we can expose that, even because our programs are usually less than 3 months long, but we're exposing these concepts and then again arming people to say, just slow down for a minute and consider this, right? Like, here's all the opportunity in your business. Here's what it does to your business. Here's all the things that you're missing by rushing to please everyone that you're speaking to. There's so much that you can do, and then allow people some opportunities to try it and practice it and show them like, oh, I just said, no, we can't do this, but we're going to do all this for you. Or no, we can't do this, but I guarantee it's going to work. Or whatever we wrap around that no, but whatever we're wrapping around that for your team, again, to like help them feel comfortable trying it, that's really what's going to give them like long-term shift in behavior. And get them excited. Again, get them really excited about the fact that they can say no and still have like, they can have more money in their pockets, and your company can invest more money in the team. And also your clients are super delighted to work with you, maybe more so.
So it's really empowering your team to make the right decisions that net result in great outcomes.
Yeah.
You touched on something a moment ago, and I've got just a couple of these questions that are sort of burning in my mind here. The first is, you touched on one where you reference like a typical sales enablement or sales org, and that Boost is different. And, you know, if someone's walking into this arena and we're trying to understand clearly, like, what is Boost's point of differentiation and why is it not just a standard sales org? Like, how are you different, and what is it that you bring that they can't?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I think that the biggest differentiator for us is that we're price focused and margin focused. There's not another organization that I've ever come across that says, I guarantee you an immediate ROI on this investment in sales training, essentially. And we guarantee it, because we are so focused on something that makes such a powerful difference, and does it in such a short period of time, right? Like, you see the lever shift within the time that you're working with us. So that's huge. I would say perhaps, again, even more so, like, we are not focused on everything. And there's a lot of really good training out there that kind of says, we're going to come in and we're going to fix everything from prospecting all the way through whatever your sales process is. We're going to go through and we're going to touch on supporting your team through every single part of that process. Or we're going to build the process for you, right? Like, you don't have a sales process. We're all just winging it. We're going to come in and build a sales process for you. We don't do that, because that's not the blue to our flame. And so instead of being at the surface of a lot of different things, we're going to come in and say, listen, this is where we are really, really excellent. I'm not saying you don't need these other things, but my favorite clients to work with, my favorite founders to work with, are the people who say, I'm already really good at what I do. I already charge at a premium. My team has a lot of tools and resources. We're good at this, but I want to be really great at it. And so let's just hone in on this part. And usually it's later in the process, like the building value and creating relationships, that's supported by the rest of the training. So like, those things I think get better, right? They all kind of elevate, but that's not where the focus is. The focus is a little bit later in the sales process, but it's also where the money is.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful. And I think that said, if you're a jack of all trades and master of none, then you're not necessarily building the value. And so, you know, if I'm sort of regurgitating back to it's, you know, the levers, you commit to it from a position of guaranteed revenue. I don't know how anyone says no to you when you're literally putting your name on the line and saying, if we don't generate more revenue or better margin, or however you're specifically framing it, then, you know, it's kind of like you can't lose here. So that's a pretty powerful hook and something that, you clearly stand behind and have done for more than a decade. So there's got to be merit to it. The other thing that I'm wondering about, and I'm sure those listening in are wondering about, is like we've touched on a lot of sort of the value proposition and some high level insights, but from your process and your perspective, like, one, who is the right kind of business to actually work with you? And like, what does that journey look like? Let's just assume, and you'll insert what your ideal client profile looks like here, but let's assume that I am that. Like, what would the journey look like? How long are we working together? What is the cadence? And yeah, just give us a little bit better insight on that.
Sure. So our ideal client would be I like to say small to mid-sized business. We work with teams as small as 1 and 2. I would say like the best teams for us are over 25 sales professionals. And again, that has scaled to hundreds of sales teams as well, or sales people as well. But kind of the 10 to 25 is a really great range of sales team members. So these are people that are negotiating on your behalf. So they have discounting power, or the power to add margin, which nobody ever does. And so you have a team, they have pricing power, and you believe they're leaving money on the table. And we've started in manufacturing and distribution. That model still works really, really well in manufacturing and distribution, but it's an industry agnostic, really. If you have people speaking about the value and they need support doing it, then they're the right fit from that perspective. As far as our process, very similar, I would say, for our flagship product. For us, we're coming in and I start with most of our clients in the discovery process. And that's really just learning, making sure that we are a right fit, making sure we can guarantee an ROI, because we do. We have 100% money back guarantee. So to your point, like, I have to make sure that I believe that there's impact we can make on a team. And really almost all the time where we go from there is involving a coach and having one of our coaches do a different type of discovery. They're coming in and understanding the business a lot deeper, understanding the team, their dynamics, their personalities. So a second discovery once they've signed up. And then we're doing a 10-week program where they're seeing content, they're consuming it online, and then they're coming in a week later to work with one of our coaches live in a Zoom, but live, to apply it to their business. And one of the things that I love in those workshops every other week for 10 weeks is the collaboration that happens there. So a lot of people approach us for pricing strategy, which we have said we don't do pricing strategy. And yet in those calls with your team, we're strategizing. We're saying what are your clients? What are the margins? Where is the opportunity? We're doing those exercises and creating outputs for leadership and for the sales team to say, here's all the opportunity, go tackle it. Let's try it. We'll see you in 2 weeks to do it again. So that's our process. We do it for over the span of 10 weeks, and we're covering everything, like I said, from that, how does margin and discount impact your business through this, how to increase price, how to do a price increase either across the board with certain clients or on certain products and services. So we're giving people the entire unpacking, change the mindset, and now here's how we execute in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, wow. I'm sure that's super transformative for any org that would go down that process. And I think one of the key takeaways for anyone here, and I'm a big believer in it too, it's that you get so close to a process and a business that often these really hard-coded facts are staring you smack in the face, and just being able to work with them and hold up a mirror probably has, material value, even in the first couple of weeks of that journey, just seeing the numbers and understanding the gaps that have clearly, happened over the course of time. And, when you're looking at these teams of 10 and 25 and 100, just the compounding net negative and positive effects on the back of an engagement like this, can be night and day. So, it really helps out the value. I mean, I've got so many more questions for you, but I know we're really coming up against time here. I just want to ask you one more question, and that is, what haven't I asked you that I should be asking you at this point in the conversation? What do I need to know that I don't about where you guys are and how you're helping businesses, or gaps that I haven't quite got to?
Yeah. I think that the one thing that I maybe would add, I mentioned really briefly that people come to us for pricing strategy. And people want a quick fix when it comes to margin or pricing or revenue, right? We want our businesses to be better. We want it to happen really quickly. And candidly, we want it to not have as little touch on our people as possible. One, we don't want to shift their behavior. We want them to just keep doing what they're doing. But two, the more people involved, the messier it is. And so people want a strategy that they can just say, this is how we do it now. You can have an A+ strategy, but if you have C- players executing on it, you're not going to get there. You can have a C strategy, and if you have A+ players executing on it, you're going to see margins improve. And so it's not the easy button to say, let's change and shift the behavior and the mindset of your team, maybe of you as a founder. It's not easier, but it's the way that works. It's not pricing strategies, very rarely pricing strategy.
On that last point, I mean, you had me in a depth of sort of deep thought, and that is, I think you've answered a question that has been on my mind, and I think our business's mind, is like, we've got good team members, they've actually done most of it themselves, but what would it look like now that we're 6-7 years into our journey and these people have been with us? Like, if I went to market now and said, I, as a co-founder of the business, no longer want to be involved in our sales function, as an owner of that function, what would this person need to look like? And it's actually part of our, we do sort of half yearly rocks essentially, but that is one of the goals, is how do we actually install a sales leader to drive it? So it really, I think, like, the thing that I'm taking away, and I'm sure most will, is that at the end of the day, it's all about the people, and you could have the best training or you could have the best outcomes, but clearly in your process, you're looking out for, is it the right seat? Is it someone who GWCs it, and can they actually fit into the vision of building back the margin that you want, or growing that margin to where you need to be? I'm glad that I asked that question, because it's definitely resonated with me personally. Alex, thank you so much for taking the time. I've learned a lot. I'm sure all of those listening in will too. So yeah, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.